Hi, my name's Charles Malki, biologist and plant expert with Ivy Organics, where we grow cool plants. And today we're going to be talking about three main topics as they relate to your home garden. Three main issues that we're going to be talking about in today's garden presentation is one being shade plants. You guys asked for it at the Fall Garden Club. How do we grow plants in the shade? And there is a science behind it. There's some things that do not tolerate living in the shade, which is the wall behind me is the shadiest part of my garden. And that strip of land that I have behind you is my sunniest part of the garden. And it only, at this time of the year, receives maybe 2 to 3 hours of sunlight, and that's it. But you can see that they're all thriving pretty well. But there is a science behind it, and I'll actually start with sharing. What I've done is I've tried putting a lot of my deciduous plants, the plants that drop their leaves come fall and winter, in the shadiest parts of the garden. So what I did is I put my fig tree and I put my apple tree. I've got behind me a plum tree as well that I put in the shadiest parts of my garden, knowing that when it's winter and they're going to be in the shade, it's going to have, it doesn't need the sun as it doesn't have the leaves in it. It doesn't have the sunlight requirement, as do evergreen plants such as my citrus, which are all around you. The other thing I wanted to share with you is being wintertime, you can see that there's quite a bit of color here in the garden, predominantly from the citrus again. I've got lemons, oranges, grapefruit that are all peaking right now. So if you want to have a garden where you're picking apricots in May, apples in June, lemons in December, you can actually be harvesting different fruits out of your garden every season of the year. So consider planting citruses. They do very well here in Los Angeles. And then the next one, quotes. And I've left this in my presentation for a couple of years now, but the best place to get ideas and inspiration for your own garden is by visiting other gardens, and that's the reason we're here today, to hopefully get some more ideas that you can take back home with you. And then a couple things I've written down to share with you guys is gardening is a science with more than one way to get fruitful results. When it comes to planting things, I might teach you something and you take it home and it doesn't work for you. You've got to practice it. You've got to try different things. You've got to, when it comes to pruning, for example, with citrus, which we'll get to later on in the presentation, I put pruning with a question mark. There's a lot of authority out there that says never prune your citrus trees. You don't need to prune them. They kind of grow the way they want to grow. There's no need to cut them back. Whereas other fruit trees, such as apricots and figs, won't produce as much fruit without the pruning. So, so there's split of authority on that. But we're going to talk about that, and you've got to learn what's best for your plants. I like pruning my citrus. I shape and design and bend and stake and do what I feel like is in the best interest of the plant, and I'm watching the results. So, and I'm going to share some of those tips with you later. What you do in your garden affects everyone, and I wrote everything's earth. And I meant to get my, I wrote GoldFish example, but I've got a betta fish in my house. That's my only pet so far. I had every pet growing up, but I'm not yet prepared to raise more than my 2 little ones. But with my GoldFish example, I did a video, and I want to talk about, while I'm talking about video as well real quick before I continue with this. You may notice that I'm mic'd up and there's a camera back there. My goal is to memorialize all of these discussions. When I did my first 10 and I didn't document them, I'm like, man, I wish I had a source that we can go back to, and especially when I have guest speakers, the one being Lisa Smith at Sandy Gitmed's house not too long ago. It would have been nice to have that as a source that you can go back and watch it one more time if you felt like there was some important pieces of information you could have used. We now have on our YouTube channel over 100 videos there. And we just started this like April of last year, so April 2016 until now. So in less than a year, there's now over 4,500 people in the world that have joined this class, this forum, to get this information that we're talking about right now. So in addition to you guys, there's 4,500 people back there. It's pretty cool. Great way to like communicate to people across the country and around the world. What my point is with this, with what you do in your garden affects everyone and everything's earth is, and I meant to have a bottle of, I don't want to talk about a bad product, but I'm going to say it anyways, Roundup. There's major lawsuits against that corporation for the fact that you could be eating your meal at whatever restaurant, and if some scientists dissected your food, there's probably Roundup in it. They're pesticides and their chemicals, even though it was maybe applied to a farm, wherever, after the rains that we got that washes into the rivers, into the lakes, into the streams, into the ocean, and now it's affecting the fish that you eat, it's in everything. Like, it's affected a lot. And even on farms that have switched from chemical farming to organic farming, and usually it requires 3 consecutive years of organic farming before you get certified organic, there's still trace elements of these remnants of chemical products that are making their way into your food and you're eating it. And we hear it all the time, and we have become accustomed to it in America. But my wife, who was born and raised in Sweden, and I've done some research, most, if not all of the European countries, it's forbidden to be putting chemicals and doing GMO, genetic modified plants and animals and giving it to people. Like, it just doesn't make sense that we've taken our food and, you know, and our health to that extreme. The goal and the trend in gardening is to do things as organically as possible, and there's a lot of benefits, and I'm hoping to share some of those with you today. So again, with this quote, the goal is what you put into your garden. With the rain that we had yesterday and this major storm we're going to have tomorrow, whatever I'm doing back here is going to end up in your river and your lakes, and ultimately on that fish that you're eating on your table that ends up in the ocean. And I'm sure it crosses into other foods as well. So be careful what you do on your property. And I'm in the process of actually writing a book to specifically address these issues and how to do things safely in a more responsible way. In regards to staying connected, I just mentioned the YouTube channel. If you go in and subscribe to it, as I do things in my garden, I have someone typically recording it so I can share that information on YouTube. And that's how I got to 100. These are only 4 a year. Every time I play in the garden, I call it playing because it's my fun time. After I'm done with work and after I'm done playing with the kids, it's playing in the garden time. I try to record what I can and what I feel is informative and would be something different than the other 100 videos that are already out there. So if you subscribe, you'll get that information automatically emailed to you. It's also on Instagram. I post some news, Twitter, Facebook I use the least, but I also use it. And if anybody has other opportunities and ways of communicating this, I'm asking you guys if you can help. I would appreciate it. My goal and what I'm working on this year is to try to get into HGTV, Home and Garden, or any gardening shows. If you guys know of anyone, that's my ask. And now we'll continue. If you go to the winter solstice slide, it says, finally winter. And I'm like, yes, it's a global celebration. I'm going to talk about myself, but I know that there's several people I know that are affected by winter every single year. I remember learning back in college, psychologically, your body naturally goes into somewhat of a depression state, even if you're not a depressing personality. Winter's got a lot less light. I wrote it somewhere here. 9 hours and 53 minutes of light compared to the 14 and a half hours. So we're talking about an additional, what's the difference? Somebody help me. 4.5 extra hours, thank you. So that's a big deal. 4.5 extra hours per light. I know that, I remember in the study I learned back in college in England, they would say that you're supposed to turn on more fluorescent lights in their house and do things to improve the mood, especially when you have shorter days. But we're lucky that we have our 9 hours and 53 minutes. I know other northern countries might be somewhere closer to 6 and 8 hours, which I know the effects are greater. But the point being is winter, the winter day, December 21st or 22nd, depending on the year, is a global celebration. Many cultures around the world celebrate it as it's the end of the darkest day and it's the beginning of more light every single day, going all the way until the first day of summer. A couple celebrations I wrote down for you is Yalda, something, my hairdresser is Persian, and my wife being Yalda, and she told me this 2 years in a row, and it didn't click until this last December, like early December. And then I did a presentation, which you'll find on YouTube. I went to the Observatory, and I talked about the lines and how much the sun moves and all of these things. But Yalda is a Persian holiday, and the word Yalda is an Assyrian word, and my background is Assyrian. But Yalda is a Persian celebration where they'll have like a lot of dried fruit, figs, an important fruit as well as watermelon. And by eating all of these fruits on that day, and they'll stay up late and read these poems and do, you know, however they celebrate. But the goal is you're going to go into the year with bountiful health and success and everything good. But another group I wrote out of Arizona are the Hopi Indians, the Roman festival of Saturnalia, Scandinavia, St. Lucia's Day, and in China there's a Dong Zi, I guess is how you pronounce that. But the point is the list goes on and on and on and on. My goal with sharing winter with you is when winter comes back next time and you're like, man, I hate winter. I am not a fan of winter. As long as I can remember, and it's probably from my past being a swimmer, I hate the cold. And if there's a hell, for me, it's a cold one. It's not hot because I can tolerate the heat. And I know there's some people that hate the heat and they love the cold. But I'm not a winter person, and I'm so looking forward to spring and especially summer and even early fall. But winter I usually dread, but I'm trying to, for those that hate it, to find a way to look at it optimistically, being winter is the defining day of better days to come. So December 21st, called the winter solstice, the shortest daylight hours of the year. And I wrote the comparison with winter and summer. And then I gave to you, and this is my ask for you guys, is winter solstice. So the word sol means sun, and stis means, anybody? Trying to make this interactive a little bit because I've been talking for like 10 minutes straight now. Stis, any guesses? Latin, college. The death of the sun. So stis means still. And I researched it, and I also gained this when I went to the observatory last. So sun still. Anybody want to guess now again why sun still? Like, what does that mean? Because it's the shortest day?
And it's switching.
So the sun still, when you go to the observatory next, and man, it's getting busy. I went out there like at 11 o'clock on winter day to do this educational thing. And it took me almost an hour to park, and I'm like, never again. Like, and I know that they're also in the process of working out parking and shuttles and all these things. And I sat with a couple other boards to see like the impact of these issues on us. But anyways, that aside, sun still, the ancient people like in Egypt and other countries around the world that studied the planets, when they saw the sun set on winter, that winter day, December 21st, the day before, the day of, the day after, the sun sat in exactly the same spot. It didn't move across the horizon. Like the sun does not, I mean, I'm hoping most of you know that when the sun rises, it doesn't rise or set in the same place ever, like in the year. Like maybe the following year it will, but over the course of 365 days, it does not rise in the same place, nor does it set in the same place. So when the sun usually rises, for me, it usually comes like behind that giant pine tree that's over there. So as soon as it comes up, my entire garden, like the sun would be burning in my face in the morning, and then it would be setting on this side of that ficus hedge, like right in between. So my entire garden is in the sun from sunrise to sunset. But right now, because the sun is so low in the sky, it's pretty much hiding behind those homes pretty much all day long, casting this huge shade on my garden. So solstice, we got summer solstice and then the winter solstice. It just basically means when those historical astronomers were looking at the sun, it just wasn't moving. It was in the same place for those few days. And then what happens is, as those days pass, it just moves a little bit faster and faster, with the fastest moving near the fall and the spring equinox. And then it's moving a lot faster across the horizon. So now the word equinox, what does equa mean? Equal, and then nox? Night. So it just means equal night, which means you have equal day. 12 hours of sun, 12 hours of light, and the shift is going towards getting the slide before, it's going towards 14 hours and 25 minutes of sun by the time we get to the first day of summer. And then on June 21st, you can start getting depressed because every day is going to start getting shorter as it works its way back to winter. But that's basically what's happening with our timeline. The gardening tip, and I wanted to share this with you guys, is in Los Angeles. I put in my zip code, and there's some websites you can use for doing this. Is your last average chance of freezing temperatures is the last week of January. So for those of you that love gardening and the ground is warm, dry enough, you can actually start planting your tomatoes, your cucumbers, or you can actually start with your garden. In regards to planting, here it is. I thought I set it down.
Charles?
Yes.
If it keeps raining like this, even in February, you think we can still plant tomatoes?
Ideally, you should wait until the ground is actually workable. I know there's a couple more. Yeah, it's going to be too wet and probably too hard to work on it. So you might wait until like.
Does it have to be completely dry?
No.
How long after rain should we wait?
I would just say until the ground is workable. Like for me, the issue I have is it's all in the shade. If I had some sunlight on the ground, then I would start off with like radishes, for example. Like radishes, within 30 days, I've now got radishes I can eat and the leaves that I can turn into a salad. I find radishes to be like the most versatile, like beneficial plant. Obviously, you can add some chard. You can start growing a lot of stuff. For me, typically by mid-February, and no later than the first week of March is when I get the best success with my tomato plants. If I start them early, I'll end up with giant plants with maximum yields. If you start your tomatoes in June, they'll still grow and you'll still get big plants, but you've just lost half your crop that you would otherwise get to enjoy if you started earlier. The goal I wanted to share with you, let's see if it made it in. Anyways, I had a list of plants I wanted you to consider, but we'll just continue. So I'll just do it from memory. The goal is right now being cool enough and knowing that your last chance to frost is past. It would be a great time to start what I call cool loving plants. You can grow your onions, you can grow your radishes, you can grow your chard, you can grow lettuce. I don't know if I said that already. Your hot loving plants would be your cucumbers, your squash, your cucumber, squash, tomatoes, peppers. Those plants, it's probably safer to wait until closer to March and even April. As again, they're not fans of the cold. My hands are getting numb already. It's that cold. So anyways, we discussed that. So I wrote, so I said, also another point on gardening tip, I said, so start, but do not finish your spring garden in February. The point being is to scatter your efforts in case there's disease in your garden, in case there's that chance of frost, in case there's a flood that comes through. The goal is not to finish it. The goal is to scatter your efforts. Add a few tomatoes in March, April, add a couple more in May, June. Just try to find other things to do in your garden. Like I like to spend an average of an hour or two per week, usually on my Saturday, Sundays, and just try to give yourself some projects, and you'll reap the benefits throughout the year. But the goal is you can start sooner than the rest of the country that's waiting for March and April. We've got the benefit of living in Los Angeles, so take advantage of it. Another important point I want to share with you that's not in this pamphlet, which is I think of value, is your plants in the winter, in a way, are starving. With all the rains that we had, and for those of you that love fertilizing your plants and taking care of them, with all the rain that we're getting, it's washing your soil. It's the beneficial part is it's getting rid of all the salts that you have, that you may have introduced into your garden. But at the end of the day, all the things that you put in your garden is gone. It's being washed away. An example I saw was up in Alaska, a documentary where, with all the rains and the storms and everything, like washing all of the nutrients and the, all of the leaf mold and everything that's there to contribute towards the soil, most of that's just getting washed away. And for these months, the plant's starving, but at the same time, the plant's metabolism, no matter what it is, as you can see, my lemons are growing, there's some growth, there's flowers, there's fruit, but the metabolism is slower now, these winter months, than it is come spring, summer, and fall. So do not fertilize your plants in the winter. Historically, since before us, plants don't reap much benefit from the soil in the winter months. It's spring, summer, and fall that you should be paying attention, and if you want to feed them, you'd feed them in those months, but not in the winter.
Charles,
Yeah.
we have Zymbidiums, and they're already starting to spike somewhat, even with all this rain.
Yeah.
You know, we usually get one bloom a year, which comes in the spring and it lasts for a few months.
Yeah.
What should we do with them now?
If you're talking about fertilizing them,
We're doing some, yeah, whatever.
so if it comes to feeding the Zymbidiums, you would feed them in the fall, you'll feed them in the spring, you'll feed them in the summer, but you will not feed them in the winter. You just take a break, you just leave them alone.
Start feeding them in September, and there are 2 different types of food that you use. And one is from September till February.
So the food you'd give them like in September would probably be higher in phosphorus, so you encourage more bloom when the time's right for it to come. The things when it comes to citrus, and it's going to be in here, one thing you can do, because most plants' uptake of nutrients through the roots in the winter is minimal, what you'll do and what you can do is use a foliar spray. I don't know if you've ever heard about feeding plants through the leaves, and I've done a couple educational things on YouTube discussing foliar feeds where you can buy nutritional sprays and get those micronutrients into the plants by spraying the leaves, and that's something you're supposed to be doing on a lot of your tropical plants, which that's our last topic. But you can also do it using organic products and adding it to water and making like your own compost tea and taking some of that water and using that as a nutritional spray on top of the plant as well. And that has far greater benefits, being you've got these microorganisms that are in the water that'll then compete with any pests that are within your plant, making a more pest-free plant as well. So you're like giving it like antibiotic benefits by using a compost tea foliar spray. So that's another way to feed your plants in the winter without fertilizing the soil. Our next slide here is natives, and I've been talking about natives now for at least 3 gardening clubs, if not 4, consecutively. So I think this will be the last one for a while, but our plant giveaway today are native plant based, and I want to explain to you why we're doing this again, and probably there'll be more gardening clubs this year where there'll be native plants. And again, I'm going to explain the reason why with this slide, which is titled, Why Grow California Natives? The first one is they're drought tolerant and they have a low water requirement. The other benefit, they're colorful and beautiful, erosion control, no pesticides, no fertilizers, support your local habitat and wildlife, your bees, butterflies, ladybugs, praying mantis, aphids, earthworms, hawks, P22 and beyond, and maximize the efficiency within your garden, pest control, pollination, decomposition, etc. That's a lot of stuff here. I keep looking for this one slide, and here it is. So before I address this, that sounds like a lot of benefit that this one little plant can have on this world. How can this little sage plant benefit P22? Does anybody have any thoughts, or does anybody have these questions? Like, does that make sense? Like, how can we got sage? I've also got buckwheat, a couple of varieties of buckwheat. So if the deer eat it again, so you're contributing towards the ecosystem. Any other thoughts, ideas? Good to cook with, and it smells great.
Hummingbirds love it.
Yeah. So the goal with doing California natives is you're basically supporting what already existed here before us. The goal is I'm going to talk about it with the next slide, but before I get to that, the goal with planting your natives is you're supporting, and I've got an article here which I picked up from the Los Angeles Times, which talks about vanishing habitats, and this was written by Lemke and Cohn. And does anybody know what the word habitat means? Yes, Sasha, you got a question?
No, I don't. I'm just going to close the top of my.
I should have had my jacket on. Habitat. What does habitat mean? Homes. So by by planting California native plants in your garden, you've now just created homes for the already existing native wildlife that exists here. So by planting, for example, my Meyer lemons that are off to my right over here, are Meyer lemons habitat for our native wildlife? Answer is no. Sure, there's bees on it and butterflies are drawn to it and whatever else, and they're reaping the benefits of the nectar, but it's not a native plant that they have grown accustomed to in their evolutionary history that they're looking for as they're flying across the sky. Some of these butterflies have senses of smell that can smell from anywhere from, it's 3 miles to 7 miles away. Honeybees is, I think, about a mile away. With the butterfly, I'm thinking about 7 miles is like from here to Beverly Hills. It feels like 45 minutes, an hour away most days. But imagine that butterfly in Beverly Hills smelling your native plants that are in your garden saying, I need that. I can't find it anywhere. My goal with this giveaway is we have now created, and I got this from Lisa Novick at the Theodore Payne Foundation that Brad introduced me to. But she said we're creating islands of opportunities for these native insects and butterflies and hummingbirds to basically be connected throughout now the Hollywood Hills. And that's the goal with today's giveaway. This article that was written by the Los Angeles Times are talking about, there's a California gnatcatcher which is on the endangered species list. It's a small little bird that eats gnats, but they're dependent on some of these sage plants that are here today. They need it to get, obviously they're bugs, but they also feed on the seeds and whatever else. Cactus wren are on the verge of endangerment. Orange throat whiptails, even California buckwheat, which I know we've got some buckwheats. I don't know if I've got exactly the California variety, but they're saying that's on the endangered list. A checker spot butterfly. So these are just some. There's so much more. As our population continues to grow and we keep on laying more foundations for our homes, we're clearing the way for what would otherwise be nature. The goal also, by planting natives in between your landscape that you want, as you can see what I've done here, in that fountain I have in the corner, that whole ground cover at the bottom is a variety of about 10 different native plants that are there. Behind Sasha is my California poppies, and then right behind that there's a couple pieces of fuchsia that are also native. Behind me I have a buckwheat. You'll notice it's behind the hibiscus, like of a white grayish color. That's another type of buckwheat plant called El Conejo. It's another California variety buckwheat. Most of my ground cover in between all the fruit trees are all wild native plant seeds that I've also put. And you'll notice as you leave, there's a lemon tree right at the edge of the street, like if you came up the steps. That whole ground cover is also all native towards your exit as you leave. The other side are all these succulents that are on the way out of my garden as well, making more room for more native patches. Some of these plants will actually be there probably in the next few weeks. So as you walk in front of my house, my goal is to create as much natives in between. I want my fruit trees, I want my vegetables, I want everything else. And the goal is I'm going to be attracting all these pollinators to further improve my yields of fruits and vegetables and everything else. So we all win, and my water's going to things that are benefiting, one, the environment, and two, my family. And three, you guys when I share it with you, because I'm going to have so many lemons to give back. But that's the importance of natives. Evolution, history of plants. So the Earth is 4.5 billion years. Single plants, cells, like the first origins of plant life was 3.5 billion years ago with like algae, euglena, protozoans. These single cell plant cells that still exist on the surface of the ocean. And I'll make this more interactive and ask the question. When it comes to oxygen that we're breathing here in the air, is most of our oxygen coming from the ocean, or is most of our oxygen coming from the plants on Earth? Can we put our hands up in the air? Plants on Earth? Raise your hands. The ocean? Raise your hands. So the answer is ocean. And it's actually the top, not even like 1/4 inch of the surface of the ocean that has these single cell plant cells they're actually giving us more oxygen than all the trees on planet Earth. But just an important point to let you know, like that's kind of how plants started in the evolutionary history on Earth. The gymnosperms, which typically produce cone type fruit, such as pine trees. I don't have any around me, but I'm looking at them behind you. But gymnosperms evolved around 300 million years ago. These are the cone-producing plants such as conifer pine trees, cycads, the sago palms, and there's only about 1 to 5,000 of these species. Compare those to 100 million years ago, so they're more recent, are the angiosperms, and these are the enclosed seeds within an ovary or the fruit. Most of our trees, flowers, shrubs, grasses, and we're talking about 200,000 species of angiosperms on Earth compared to the gymnosperms that are 200 million years older than the angiosperms, and yet there's far fewer species. So the angiosperms have done well. Talking about fruit, I just want you to understand like the concept with the angiosperms. Since we're going to be talking about citrus, the seeds, I just want to define angiosperms from gymnosperms. So with a pine cone, the seeds are not enclosed. The cone, you can just shake it and the seeds just fall out. Unlike that, if you cut an apple in half, if you cut a lemon in half, you open it up and you see the seeds enclosed. And that's one of the defining characteristics that are different between angiosperms and gymnosperms. What I like to think is what the plants did, and I know that this is in fact what they did, the plants have created the fruit to basically pass the fruit off to the animals that then consume them and move the fruit with the seeds to other locations, wherever, and that's its way of passing its genetics off. The seeds that are within the fruit, bless you, the seeds that are within the fruit are the children of that tree. And this isn't in your slide, and it's an important point, and I get this question a lot, is if I plant a lemon seed, am I going to get exactly that same lemon that I got? I'm assuming these are Meyer lemons. So if I cut this in half and I plant my Meyer lemon seeds, what am I going to get?
Who knows?
Yeah, you would think you're getting a Meyer lemon, but if I plant it, I now have a Malki lemon. It's whatever. It's mine. It's my. You know, if you want it, I'm selling my name behind it. And Meyer, it actually was named after Mr. Meyer. I mean, he found this in China, and it's scientists believe there's split research on this too, but that it's a cross between a mandarin orange and a lemon. So it's something sweet with something sour, and that's why, you know, for my wife loves them, especially again in salads, because it adds a little bit of sweetness. I know some people add sugar, you know, sometimes in making their dressings, but this automatically has more sugar than a typical lemon. We're going to be doing a taste test with a select 5 of you, because I want you guys to help me define what is the best lemon. As you can see, I'm growing a variety. So I want you guys to hopefully help me be that taste test. So when you plant a seed, you're planting something unknown. You don't know, because I've got an orange tree here, a Valencia orange behind me. Again, talking about shade, I strategically put the Valencia behind me knowing that it would ripen, and it was supposed to, even though it's starting to turn orange already, but it's supposed to ripen starting in February through like April, May. And the goal was, I was hoping the sun was going to be on it and then push the ripening of the fruit. But being that it's a new tree, and I know all the plants on this side do best once they get above the height of the wall, and then they get some sun compared to no sun, being if it's below the height of the wall. But my goal was, and that's the future, is that it gets enough sun, and then it's supposed to ripen come February, compared to a navel orange, which ripens starting November. So it would suffer competing with light, and I don't want to end up with one of those oranges that suffers getting properly ripened without the sun. So that was the reason I planted a Valencia instead of a navel. So I'm working again as the scientist of this garden to figure out what's going to work best, and it's another point I wanted to share with you guys as well. The last thing on this point, on this slide, is the modern human. How old is he or she? But how long have humans been on Earth? Any guesses?
Million years.
A million?
3.5 for Australopithecus.
3.5 million. I wrote the word modern human because that's how a lot of research wrote it. So when I give you this number, I guess it'll reference what's most like us. Any other ideas? So I guess 1.3 and 1 million.
For modern civilized man.
The civilization, they said, was only about like 6,000 or 8,000 years ago. So it's not necessarily civilized. It's just like what was, again, the word they use is modern human.
Characteristics, same characteristics.
Maybe standing straight.
Yeah.
I think that's usually how they define it. But the answer, and even if you go to, before I even say it, if you go to even the Aquarium of the Pacific, they do a whole history on impact of man. Actually, you'll even see that on YouTube as well once you guys all get connected. But I just posted it when I took my family there 2 weeks ago, and I gave you guys a little clip on a video that talks about the evolution of people. Not people, but just the damage people have had on Earth. So people have been on Earth 200,000 years ago. So you talk about these plants here that have been here for 200 million years, and you compare it to us that have only been on this planet for 200,000. So the goal is, and what is part of the education that I'll just say Aquarium of the Pacific, even though it's a lot of sources out there, they say what humans have done to planet Earth. Another one, Leonardo DiCaprio, I don't know if you saw the Before the Flood, he did it as well. What we've done to planet Earth in the last 100 years is like radical major damage to the Earth and the amount of endangered species, the global warming, like just the changes, like dozens of changes across the Earth. In the last 100 years, they said is faster and more damaging than anything that's happened in the last 200,000 years. So we're comparing 100 years of humans compared to 200,000 years of humans. And these are just some of the things that the scientists have discovered. And again, it leads back to the importance of putting in your native plants in your garden. And then we can save the Earth. But that's just part of it.
Charles.
Yeah.
I mean, it is interesting, just a comment, because when we were primitive, we didn't do the damage to the Earth so much. It's our technology and our more modern brains that are doing it.
Some of the
Man,
as-
the Indians.
as Jerry said, it's like as we're trying to get more sophisticated, we're damaging the Earth. But I feel like people are getting smarter. Like I'm wondering, like how did the government really allow us to combine insect genetics into corn and just do all these weird things to create something that's superior, and then also not tell you, and then now you're eating like bugs in your corn, not that there's bugs in there, but there's bug genetics in there. And that's not even the freakiest thing. There's hundreds of examples of genetically modified both animals and plants that scientists are creating in order to maximize efficiency. Like everything's all about, how can we squeeze another dog? But it's not necessary. And I'm sure it's in the near future. I don't know if it's going to be in this next 4 years or the next 4 years after that. But hopefully in the near future we're going to see that we're going to have a choice and that it's going to shift towards we want real food with real gardening practices. And we've complicated. I mean, these two packages, and I get calls even from people within our community that said, I'm at the nursery and I see these two products. They both look the same. They both have lemons and oranges and avocados on there, but they're two very different products. You guys all see this, right? So does anybody see the difference or can tell me the difference just by looking? Yeah, that's the main one. So one's chemically made. I'll see if I can see some derived from polymer of urea, ammonium sulfate, diammonium phosphate, phosphate of potash, magnesia, sodium borate, so zinc oxide. So all of these chemically derived chemicals that came out of a chemical factory by these scientists that mixed all these different components compared to a product like this where it will say derived from feather meal, poultry manure, bone meal, alfalfa meal, green sand, sulfate of potash, magnesia. The goal is the goal is by putting organic in your garden, and when we have rains that we had yesterday and when it finds its way into the rivers, lakes, and oceans, is you're not damaging the environment. These are all things that would be the equivalent of, you know, a chicken walking through your garden and happen to croak right next to your avocado tree, and all the soil organisms around it. We're talking about not just the earthworms, but there's beneficial bacteria, fungi, you know, the earthworms and nematodes, all these things that are consuming the feathers, the bones, the proteins, and everything else. And we're talking about not just nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium, which are your micronutrients, but everything that makes up that organism, the DNA and all the, you know, of the 118 elements on the periodic table, probably half of those elements are going into your soil and feeding the plant. And another example I did on YouTube as well, an educational example, is I took these goldfish and I said, you know, we're going to take some Miracle Grow and put in the fish bowl and dump a goldfish in there and see how long the goldfish lasts, and then do the same thing with some organic fertilizer, and see how long the fish can swim with blood and bones and feathers, and to see what the effect is. I did not put the goldfish in the Miracle Grow, just to let you know, but I did put the goldfish in the organic, and I had it there during my whole 1 hour presentation, and then took it out, rescued it, and the kids had it as a pet for a while. But the point being, the chemical stuff harms, one's the environment, the two, it does give your plants the nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium, but it does nothing to the soil biology. The goal is you're feeding and supporting and improving the structure of the soil by doing things organically. When you're feeding the earthworms, the nematodes, the beneficial bacteria are creating tunnels. The mycorrhizal fungi, they're creating a network of roots. One fungus has a root structure that can span 1,000 feet. So, I don't know, I think 1,000 feet would take me from here to Bob's house. So imagine all the trees that are in between, and we're talking about one mycorrhizal fungi hyphate, that root stretching from here to Bob's house, and benefiting, taking with it a lot of nutrients, water, and all these benefits that are in my garden, and feeding all the plants in between all the way until it gets to his home. In exchange, the plants will contribute some sugars because these fungi live under the ground. So in order for it to get its sugar source, it draws from the plants, and the plants give it sugar in exchange for, I'll take some water, I'll take some nutrients out of the soil, I'll take all of these other things. It can only accomplish this organically. Chemically, you might be damaging these mycorrhizal roots, you'll be damaging the beneficial bacteria that's in your garden, you'll be damaging all these other things. So think twice, think 100 times before you put chemicals in your garden. And think about the benefit you're actually doing to both the soil biology, erosion control, the environment, and on and on and on. But one day, it shouldn't even be a choice. I know most people are confused when they go and shop and it's whatever looks brighter or more colorful, or looks $1 cheaper. But one day, farming is going to get smarter. I don't know when and how, but hopefully we'll see it soon. Anyways, so in regards to how to get started, if you guys want to do native plants, aside from what I've got here today, I gave you guys a list of places to go, one being Theodore Payne Foundation. I gave you their phone number and address, Green Thumb Nursery, and I gave you online place you can get some seeds. And talking about seeds, what we're going to do next Saturday, and if you guys can write on your survey if you want to participate in this, the beautification committee is getting together across from Ramsey Schilling. I think it's called the Guild parking lot. It's also where the Hollywood-Knolls monument sign is. We're going to start there and basically pass out these poppy seeds that we're going to strategically have locations across the Knolls, the manor, maybe around the lake. Depending on how many people I get, the goal, I know we've already got about 6 people committed. So we'll split, we'll take our 3-pronged trowel, or what do we call it? Any ideas? You know what I'm talking about? Just something to just basically stir the surface of the soil, and just plant some California poppy seeds throughout our garden, or throughout the Hollywood-Knolls garden. So if anybody is interested in participating, please write your name and number, and I'll make sure I contact you at least a day or two in advance to make sure you join us. For those of you that can't make it, in addition to the plants, I do want to put some of these seeds in your hands. I've got some empty bags in here. And if you just want to split one of the existing bags, because I still need that many bags to go out. Every bag has at least a few hundred seeds, so take 100 back with you to your gardens. I'm just going to pass this around. You can play with this as we continue forward. So I wrote today, everybody gets a native plant, and I wrote special thank you to the donors, the people that financially contributed for these plants. Our big one was Susie Ramsey, which I'm sure most of you know. She's one of the founding, if not the founding person for the Ramsey Shilling office, or at least her husband is in that family line. And JD Sebastian, who is here recording with us today. He's also the person that has brought our Hollywood-Knolls website back to life as well. So all of our newsletter, all of the history, all of the contacts within government and city council and police, fire, whatever you need is all there. Thank you, JD. And those of you, I was hoping Susie Ramsey could make it today. For those of you that know her, if you could also thank her, I know she'd appreciate it. I told her that we were going to be doing this today with her contribution as well. California native seedlings, baby plants. I gave you some instructions on how to get started. I'm not going to review it. I'm going to leave that for you guys. And